One of the most important lessons that I learned when working in sales is that people, especially in business to business sales, do not buy things because they like them. They do not buy things because they think they sound nice or helpful. They buy things because they have a challenge that's either costing them money or preventing them from going and earning more money as a business. Once I understood that, it became very clear that discovering those problems was going to be one of the most critical elements of closing deals with those customers. Because in order to show that I could help them, I first needed to understand what was going wrong with the way they were doing things today. What's up, folks? My name is Will Aiken. I've been a top performing SaaS account executive and a sales trainer for over 8 years. And much of my success has come from being able to run a great discovery process and discovery call. So in this video, this micro course, I'm going to be walking you through step by step on how to do effective discovery that is going to result in your deals closing more often. All right, so step one, before we even get into the discovery call, you need to be very, very clear on the problems that you can help your customers solve. The best place to look for this type of thing is going to your CRM and looking at your closed deals. You want to understand what was happening before, what was going wrong before someone started looking at your solution. Most people gravitate towards talking about the ROI and the positive impacts their solutions have had, but neglect to understand what is wrong with the absence of their solution. Go ahead and look at your case studies. What you're going to be looking for is looking for the before state. What was happening before they started using your product? What was wrong with that? And what impacts was that having on the business? Understanding that will allow you to ask the right types of questions during discovery to figure out if your customer has a true need for your product. Once you have an understanding of the types of problems that you can help solve for your customers and the way those show up and the way the customers experience them and the impacts they can have on their business, you're now ready to start your discovery process. This is typically one of the very first steps in your sales process. It can come in the form of a discovery call, but can also be combined with other sales stages and other sales calls that you might have for your customer. It is important to do this up front because if you can understand what is going on in your customer's world, what problems they have, and what's causing those problems, you're going to be in a much better position to show how your product or your service actually helps solve those problems. The very first thing you want to do before you start asking questions to your prospect is align expectations. No one likes feeling like they're being interrogated, but it becomes much easier to ask people questions once you have their permission to do so. So at the very beginning of an introduction or a discovery call, you want to make sure you set an agenda that gets them to opt in to answering your questions. That might sound something like this. Hey, the goal of today's call is to understand what you're doing today, what might not be going as well as it could be as it relates to this, or to understand if our solution is in a position to help you overcome that. Does that sound like a good plan? If they say yes, beautiful. You now have the permission to ask questions, and it's not going to come across as weird as to why you're asking these questions because you've explained your reason up front and got them to opt into answering these questions. Now, some people might push back on you. They might just say, hey, I want to see the product. I would like to get a demo. I don't want to answer any questions. That's okay. Some people are further along their buying journey than others. So what you want to do there is match their urgency. Understand why they are so urgent to see a product demo, or even combine the demo with some light discovery. So you could say something like, it seems like you have a pretty good understanding of what you're looking for. Could you maybe just get me up to speed on why it is you're even looking for a solution in the first place? That way you're giving them what they want while also still getting some context that's going to help you better position your solution to solve their issues. Now, once they're opted into having this conversation, I like to follow a framework where I understand their current situation and then understand what problems are going on with that situation. From there, I can start to uncover or suggest what's causing those problems because that's what my solution is going to try and solve for. And finally, I'm going to try and uncover an impact that these problems are having on their business. It's important to understand the problem because, frankly, if there is no problem, they're probably not going to buy what you're selling. Everyone would like to be healthier or fitter, but not everyone is going to do that unless there's a real motivator to doing so. And problems or issues are far more motivating than potential gains and benefits. Understanding the root cause of those problems, what's caused those issues to take place in the first place, is really important because that's exactly what you're going to be able to show your solution solves. If you don't understand what's causing those issues, then it could be being caused by something that your product doesn't even assist with. So it's really important to get them to agree on what the root cause of those problems are so you're in a better position to show how your solution is going to address those root causes. And then finally, it's really important to understand the impact of those problems because if those problems are annoying or mildly irritating, that's not really a great reason to buy a solution. The impact of those problems is their motivation and their reason for wanting to solve them. If there's not a big impact, it's very unlikely that they're going to be really motivated to solve those issues. Ideally, that impact is monetary, but it can also come in the form of time, lost opportunity, slowed growth, anything along those lines. The bigger the impact that you can uncover, the more motivated that customer is actually going to be to decide to even buy a solution, and ideally, your solution. So when it comes time to ask those questions, here's how I actually go about it and types of questions I might be trying to ask at a cluster at. Up front, we mentioned already, you set an agenda, you get them to opt in to being willing to answer these questions. From there, you can take things in one of two directions. Number one, you can ask them, hey, what made you want to have a conversation today? And they might give you the lay of land. That's really good for inbound conversations, but for outbound conversations, you're the one who reached out to them. So they might just say something like, oh, well, I'm curious to check it out. Or I don't know, you tell me. In those cases, what I like to give them is a menu. So I'll tell them what other problems people like them have been experiencing that they come to us to solve. That might sound like this. Well, typically VPs of finance come to us when they're running into one of two big issues. Number one, they're finding their budgets and their actual projects are becoming disconnected, which means that they're often either under or over budgeting on their projects themselves, which is causing a ton of issues down the road. For some people, though, that's not so much of an issue, but it's more so that their team aren't really collaborating. A lot of people are running Excel spreadsheets and reports on their laptops, on their desktop. And what that means is they run into a ton of issues when the person takes time off or they're trying to run month-end reports, and not all of that data and those spreadsheets are centralized in one single place. I'm curious though, which of those two issues do you relate to more? Now, ideally, they select one of those issues, and now you're at the same spot that someone might have told you, hey, here's why I took the call. From there, the call flow and structure is much the same. So you might say, oh, you mentioned this issue. Could you tell me a little bit more about that as it relates to your business? You might ask them for an example of how that issue has popped up in their business. You might ask them to walk you through their process today so you can pinpoint exactly where that issue is cropping up and what's causing that issue. You might ask them how long this thing's been an issue for. This will give you an idea of how motivated they are to solve it. If they tell you it's been an issue for 5 years and they've not done anything to solve it yet, that probably tells you that this isn't a huge issue for them. On top of that, you might ask them what they might have done to try and solve this issue already. If it's their first shot at trying to solve the problem and the conversation you're having with them is the first time they've even tried to solve it, then that again is a bit of a red flag that they might not be as motivated as they could be to solve this issue. On the other hand, if they've tried this, this, and this, you can tell that this is something that's actually important to them and something they've already taken action on trying to solve in the past, which means they're going to be much more motivated to really consider your solution or service as a way to solve this issue. If you haven't already heard or understood this in the responses they've been giving you, you might ask, hey, what do you think is causing this issue? Or you might even prompt them by saying, hey, a lot of people find that this is the cause of the issue. Do you think that's the same case for you, or would you think it was something else? Now, along the way here, to avoid sounding like you're interrogating them, because you're going to be asking a lot of questions, there are a few things you want to do to try and soften up the questions you're asking. You might make the question a little bit lighter by softening up front by saying, hey, I've heard that a few times before. A lot of times it's this issue causing that. What do you think is causing the issue in your case? Or you might say, hey, I'm a bit curious. What is your actual process for getting this done today? Adding little phrases like that to the start of your question are going to soften them. Another thing you can do to really make people feel understood and more willing to tell you more is recap what they've told you in your own words. So basically, get everything that they've said to you and say, okay, let me know if I'm hearing this right. You've been running into this issue for X years. You think it's being caused by this. You've tried this to solve it so far. Have I got that all right? That will again make them trust you more and make them more willing to be forthcoming with further questions. People trust people who understand them. So recapping is a superpower when it comes to discovery. The last thing you want to uncover, and this is probably the most important, is the impact of the problems that are facing their business. So you might say something like, assuming you fix this issue, what's going to be different about the way you do business? And then you might say something like, oh, you said that this thing would be different in your business. How far away is that from where you're at today? Or you might say, earlier on, you told me about this scenario that happened, this example where this issue cropped up. What ripple effect did that have on the business? The one thing you want to avoid doing here is asking cliche questions like, what impact is this having on your business? Because a lot of buyers have heard those types of questions before. You want this to sound genuinely curious and conversational, so they're more willing to open up to you in this regard. All right, so you've uncovered a problem, you understand what's causing that problem, and you understand some of the potential impacts that problem is having on the customer's business, and that's the reason why they might want to look at solving that with you. Now it's time to actually show them or give them some confidence that you're actually able to help them with this problem. You can either tell a story about a customer who was like them in the past and the impacts and outcomes they achieved with your product, or you might opt to do a micro demo. You might just say, hey, you said that this was an issue. This is how our product would generally solve that specific piece. I know that's not a super in-depth overview, but do you think at least at initial glance that this would solve that issue? What you're trying to do here is give them confidence, but also potentially try and close them on a potential next step. From here, what you typically do is go into a bit more of a custom demo where you might show them a bigger, broader overview of your product. You might even customize it to their individual use case, and you might even invite a few other people from their team. All you're trying to do here is make sure that you're giving something in return for all the gets that you just got by asking all these questions and learning more about their business. If you do uncover something that your product can assist with, or you show them a demo, what I like to sometimes do is do like a soft trial close. So you could say something like, hey, I know I showed a lot there, or hey, I know that isn't much, but do you think that would help with the issue that you told me about before? If they say yes, then that is a great transition to then move to next steps. Understand how they typically go about buying solutions. Figure out who else might need to be involved. Questions you can ask here are, hey, in the past when you've looked at solutions, what's been your process and who's been involved in that evaluation? Or you might say, what we typically do from here is go to more of a custom demo that's more tailored to your use case. Who do you think from your team would feel left out if they weren't involved in that process? Or you might say, ahead of time, I looked up on your LinkedIn and I saw this person work in this department. Do you think they would want to get involved in this next step so they can ask questions and poke and prod and make sure this is a fit for their departments as well? Now, from there, you want to close up things up and then you want to make sure that you book that next step in. If there is no next step, there is no deal. And if they're pushing back on you about booking their next step, then maybe there's something you've missed along the way. You might want to try and even disqualify their lead by saying, hey, typically when people don't want to progress from here, it's often because, this doesn't look like the fit they were hoping it would be. Am I picking that up wrong or am I missing something here? If they agree to a next step, tell them, brilliant, I'll send you a calendar invite and I will also send you a recap email. This recap email is more important than it seems. What you want to do is make sure you list out all the problems that you uncovered and then cover all the next steps you might have agreed on. The next step generally is going to be a demo. You might also give them some homework to send you some data or some information. You might even have some homework for yourself to send them more resources, videos, that type of thing as well. Be sure in this email to ask them to confirm if everything in the email is correct, because this gets them to opt in again and make sure that you've got their buy-in on that next step. So that's discovery at a very high level. Some extra resources that you might want to consider looking at when it comes to discovery are books like Gap Selling and the Sandler Sales System. A lot of my discovery approaches are based on these two sales methodologies and are great resources to understand why you should be doing any of this in the first place and give you more ideas of what types of questions you'd be asking in the future. Finally, one of my favorite books on discovery is a book called Question-Based Selling by Thomas A. Fries. It's not a super popular one, but it is super tactical and explains why some of these questions are so important and gives you different ideas on how you can ask these questions. So in summary, discovery is really important to understand the problem you're trying to solve before you start trying to sell your solution, because understanding that problem will better equip you to prove that your solution is worth investing in and make sure you're talking to customers who are actually motivated to buy a solution in the first place. Therefore, you work with the right fit customers and they will end up more confident that you'll be able to help them with your solution.